To conclude our series on food styling, I'd like to take a minute to revisit that concept of storytelling. If you remember, I mentioned that the way you style your food is the most versatile tool you have in telling stories through your photographs. So in this lesson, we'll talk again about that story blueprint that I outlined in lesson 3, with those 4 questions that you can ask yourself to tell a consistent story through every food photo shoot. And when we look at that in the context of styling, we'll see that our job is twofold. We need to style our food in a way that informs the viewer of what they're looking at. And we also need to style in a way that creates emotions. In this lesson, we'll look at ways of doing both of those things, of how to style to create information and how to style to create emotion. But finally, no matter what type of story we're trying to tell, with food photography, it's always a delicious story. Our job is to help readers connect with our food in a way that makes them hungry and makes them feel like they could reach through the screen and take a bite. And we'll talk for a moment about that as well. So if you remember in lesson 3, I mentioned that story blueprint, where you ask yourself these 4 questions, and then you're more likely to tell a consistent story through your food. The first is, of course, what is the subject? The second is, how do I let others know what this subject is? How do I share this information? The third is, what feelings do I have about this subject? And then the fourth is, how do I describe these feelings? Now, if you break up this blueprint into 2 parts, you realize that the first 2 deal with information. What is the subject? And how do I share the information about this subject? And the second 2 deal with emotions, about what feelings do I have and how do I share these feelings? So looking at food styling through this lens, we start to see that you really have 2 jobs. You have to style to inform, and you have to style to create emotion. It's important to inform readers through the way you style your pictures. One thing you can do is add garnishes. This is a strawberry milkshake, and there's strawberries in the picture. And that really shows viewers immediately that this is a strawberry milkshake. It leaves no question in their mind. Second, you should make the food the focus. Too many times people will try to get too creative with the way they're setting up their dishes. But in my experience, one of the best things you can do is keep it simple and keep it focused on the food. In a similar spirit, you want to keep it natural in terms of what is the food supposed to look like and how can you make it look even more like it's supposed to look. If you're making oatmeal, you want to have that natural rough texture in the oatmeal that makes it look real. Or if you're making something like pasta, you want to have light, fluffy pasta noodles that make it really clear and really obvious and keep it natural so it looks like it's supposed to look. And above all else, keep your pictures fairly simple. Don't add too much to them. Don't stray too far from the point. Try to keep it really centralized, focused on the food, natural, with simple garnishes that explain what the picture is, and you'll go much, much farther than a lot of people do with food photography. And once you've tackled the information part, you also need to create emotions, because if you remember in lesson 3, we talked about how storytelling through your food photography is about creating that human connection. So if you can create the connection through the emotion, it does something really powerful. And one way to do that is actually just to be realistic. Those 6 elements we talked about in the last video were really just about creating realism in your pictures. Adding real garnishes, using one real serving, because in my experience, people are going to connect much more deeply with real food, one serving of real food in front of them in the picture. And there is a lot of creative things you can do, but then that borders more on art as opposed to sharing the story behind your food. You can do whatever you want and you can be as creative as you want, but in my experience, simple and realistic food goes a lot farther. Second, you want to be clear. If you clutter your picture with too much and there's too much craziness going on, it can make it harder for them to connect with your picture. And if they can't connect with it, they're not going to have an emotional experience. So try to, again, keep it focused and clear on the food. But while keeping that in mind, you don't want to go too far towards the boring side of things. There's some pictures where it's very clear, but they're a little bit boring. Which is why, for example, in this picture, I added the sriracha stripes along the side of the plate, and I put it on a blue background, and it really creates a bold sense where if someone's looking at a bunch of pictures on Instagram, they're probably going to stop on this one and look at it. They may not like it or they may like it, but they're going to stop and look because there's a sense of boldness, like, ooh, I got to check this out. And that's an emotional response that's really important to create through your pictures. There's also a lot of interesting science behind the way colors are used in photos. We'll talk about that in the very final section of this course, but on Pinterest, for example, colors that have red and orange get pinned like 30 or 40% more times than pictures that have more muted colors. So if you add a little more color to your picture on purpose, it can go farther in helping you create emotion and create a human connection with your audience. Now, in this section on styling, we've gone over a bunch of information. We've talked about the blueprints, we've had the 6 elements of successful styling, and we've done a lot. But we can really deduce that all down to one simple message, which is that you're trying to tell the story of delicious through your pictures and through the way you style them. If you can make your reader say, I want to grab it out of the screen and take a bite, again, you've done your job. And we've mentioned that quote before, and that should really be the motto of this course, and the motto that runs through your mind as you're creating your scenes, as you're setting up your food, as you're doing your lighting, and as you're taking your pictures. Create that story of, I want to grab this out of the screen and take a bite, and you've really accomplished your job. The homework in this final lesson should be a lot of fun. I want you to recreate a child memory that you have around food. We all have childhood memories of our parents making us something and having a really strong emotional connection to this food. And since that's so powerful, I want you to use that powerful emotional connection to help you recreate that dish using the information we've learned here. So now that you know how to convey emotions a little better and how to style your food in a way that's clear, in a way that conveys information, and in a way that communicates those emotions, try that with a very obviously emotional subject for you, like a childhood dessert or something your mother used to make. So recreate this dish and set it up in a way that puts what we've learned into practice. And I think this will be a lot of fun, and you'll be surprised at how much you've learned and how much easier it will be to set up this photo shoot, even though we haven't talked about lighting or setup or cameras. This is also the last video in the styling section, so if you need to, do a quick review. Make sure you certainly download the cheat sheet that's available at the end of every section. This has some of the key points we mentioned in each lesson, and it has all the homework assignments. So you can catch up on your homework, you can review any of the videos if you need a refresher, and Udemy is also a great place to ask questions. Along the sidebar of the videos, there's a tab where you can ask questions, and if you have questions, ask them there. Other students and I can answer them and help you gain more clarity on any subjects you may have questions about.